So the final book of William Gibson's Sprawl trilogy, the trilogy that begun with the outstanding, genre-defining, genre-creating Neuromancer, and then continued with Count Zero, and now finally finishes off with Lisa Overdrive. No, not that cover. That's super ugly. Does anyone else hate this cover? Change it, change it. That cover's better. So, Lisa Overdrive, how good is it? Short answer? Pretty damn good. Long answer? The rest of the review. But the main question I think people are going to ask is it as good as Neuromancer? And again, no. No, it's not quite as good as Neuromancer. But this time I struggle to tell you why. Whereas Count Zero I was quite disappointed with and I had a long list of complaints. Lisa Overdrive is kind of a banger. Just like in Count Zero, we have these different plot points going on. We've got different viewpoint characters interacting with their own casts of characters, doing their own things throughout the whole book. But here, it just works a lot better. Whereas in Count Zero, I felt like all these characters and their storylines were very self-contained, isolated from each other, and kind of independent. Here, almost from the start, it's very clear that these people are interacting within the same world, using a lot of the same concepts, and they're very clearly going to be interacting with each other, and they're all very clearly working towards the same or similar things. We've got some returning characters from Count Zero, one of which is one of our viewpoint characters, ℕ𝕚𝕚𝕚, the young girl from Mass Neotech that Turner broke out in Count Zero. She's got the Mass Neotech biochip software in her head, which previously allowed her to access the Matrix without jacking into a deck, and has, during Count Zero, allowed the lower, or the entities that are purporting themselves to be the lower, to talk to her and to interact with her body. She's a world-famous SenseNet star, she's popular the globe round, she's just come out of a drug rehab facility for a designer drug that was provided to her by the company. Her and Bobby, Count Zero from the previous book, were together for a time but have since broken up. And now it seems like the entities in the Matrix are reaching out to Angie once again, and that they have some sort of plan for her. And then seemingly on a collision course with ℕ𝕚𝕚𝕚. A lot of the story in this book could be described as being on a collision course with ℕ𝕚𝕚𝕚. But our second main character is Mona, a young woman who looks surprisingly like ℕ𝕚𝕚𝕚 and is currently working as a prostitute in abject poverty, living in a slum along with her pimp. And her pimp Eddie get involved in some sort of scheme or plot that clearly has something to do with ℕ𝕚𝕚𝕚 and is clearly over both of their heads. And then the last of the, I would say, main plot points is led by Slick Henry. Slick Henry is an ex-con who did some time for car thievery and who now lives in this wasteland come dumpster come junk pile along with some other vagrants. The sort of place people go where they want to be forgotten and left alone. And it's out here where he works on his art, which is creating big robots and then having those robots fight each other as not entertainment or something along those lines. One day he's hanging out in his home in this wasteland, the factory as he calls it, and an acquaintance of his drops off a man in a stretcher who is hooked into this monolithic computer block and told, just keep him here for 2 weeks, people are looking for him, he needs to lay low. And from there we kind of spiral together as all these different storylines begin to influence each other subtly and then begin to careen towards each other. We do actually have a fourth storyline. I called the previous three kind of our main plot points, and that's because I think this fourth one serves more as an outside perspective. To begin with, I was a little bit wary of it, but I think it does a really good job of showing a character who isn't intimately involved in these events, but is aware of them and is seeing them and can interact with them. And that is the story of Kumiko, who is the daughter of a large, very powerful Yakuza boss in Japan. When the Yakuza goes into turmoil because of some event and there is infighting, he sends his daughter to London to lay low. And while in London, she gets involved in all the going-ons that are happening, and she starts to really see the bigger picture from the outside that some of our characters that are involved in the storyline can't have access to. That's a lot of characters, it's a lot of plot lines, there's a lot of threads that weave and interconnect with each other, and in general Gibson fashion, he doesn't make it particularly easy to follow. Perhaps because this is the third book and I've grown used to his writing style, I didn't find Gibson's kind of confusing writing style as hard to follow as I did the first read-through of Neuromancer. And I've actually come to really appreciate it. I feel like it makes the books feel like they're written in universe, almost. What I mean by that is, for example, a general fiction writer doesn't feel the need to explain to the reader what a television is, what a car is, what dude means, what the sort of nomenclature that we in our real world use, because they just know that. And it feels very similar in Neuromancer. Gibson doesn't explain what a deck is, what an ℓ𝕚𝕚 is, that sort of stuff, because the people in this universe just know what that stuff is. They don't need to explain it to each other. And I know that's a big complaint people have when they talk about Neuromancer. But for me, that's kind of where the magic in Neuromancer comes from, I think. I love that feeling of being dropped into a alien world and having to figure it out. I think that's part of what makes that story so good. And Gibson does it really excellently, and it continues in this book. So it's no secret, I've got a whole review up that I came off of Count Zero really disappointed and really dissatisfied. I felt like it was really unconnected, and I felt like coming off the back of The Amazing Neuromancer, it didn't feel like it respected the storylines that were laid down in Neuromancer and continued them in its own book. Mona Lisa Overdrive, however, manages to kind of retroactively change my opinion on Count Zero, because it grabs almost all the dangling plot threads and loose leads that Neuromancer and Count Zero left, and manages to tie them not only together now in this book, but show you how they were connected in the previous books. Mona Lisa Overdrive really showed me that this was a complete trilogy, not just 3 separate stories in the same universe, which is what I was led to believe. Having finished Mona Lisa Overdrive now, I can see the storyline from start to finish running through Neuromancer, running through Count Zero, and finishing in Mona Lisa Overdrive. I can see that from behind the scenes, something or someone is pulling the strings, and I can see how these characters got into the positions they got into, which wasn't clear before, because of the eventual goals that get accomplished in Mona Lisa Overdrive. I think I now have a nearly complete understanding of who did what and why across the entire trilogy. And I think it's a powerful book that manages to go back in time and change things like this. It's not quite as powerful as some other books I've read that do this. I think it is in large part doing this in reference to some of the failings and faults in Count Zero. I don't think Count Zero was written the way that it was because Gibson knew that it would get tied up in Mona Lisa Overdrive. This doesn't make me go back and change my rating of Count Zero as a book on its own, but it does improve my rating of the trilogy as a whole immensely. The world building stays top notch. We explore a lot of different places here that we didn't see before. We explore London, and we compare London to the Japan and Tokyo that we knew from Neuromancer through Kumiko's explorations of London and her talking about how the history in London is baked in and preserved and is core to the city. And we see different parts of the sprawl from New York to New Jersey to Manhattan. Manhattan is New York. And we see different cities and different parts of the sprawl itself. We see flashbacks to different areas that are a bit more impoverished. And we see some more of how general people live, as well as how the rich and high class live and how they interact with the world. We explore a bit more of the Matrix here, not as much as in Neuromancer, and it's still a failing, I think, in this book that we don't delve deeper into the Matrix and what it is and how people interact with it. But there's more of it here than there was in Count Zero, so I think that's a bonus. Additionally, we have some returning characters from Neuromancer that I loved. We have some characters from Count Zero, which I thought were kind of ineffectual in Count Zero, that really come into their own and have their own agency and goals and flaws in this book that get explored a lot better. We have a lot of new characters that, for the most part, I thought were all pretty brilliant. They reminded me of the characters from Neuromancer, all of them having their own, their goals and motivations and believable reasons for being a part of the storyline. And look, usually I'd spend this part of the review talking to you about a few things I don't like, and really I struggle to think of anything concrete here. I don't think it feels as magical and genre-defining and mind-bending as Neuromancer. It's not quite as tight and efficient a story as Neuromancer was, I think. It's a huge step up from Count Zero, in my opinion, and it brings the whole trilogy really high up now. I really love this trilogy of books now. Whereas after Count Zero, I was worried that I was only going to like Neuromancer. So, it's better than Count Zero. It's missing just a little bit of something, a little je ne sais quoi to get close to Neuromancer. I'm feeling really comfortable with Neuromancer being a 10 out of 10 for me, one of my favourite books of all time. Count Zero, I can't remember exactly what I gave it in the review, but I think it was about a 4 out of 10. And Lisa Overdrive. It's better than Count Zero. It's almost as good as Neuromancer, I think. It brings the whole trilogy to a really good conclusion. It takes some of the complaints I feel people had about the endings of the last 2 books and recontextualizes them, at least for me in my mind, to make more sense and for them to have been necessary for the story we were telling. It kind of redefines the story we were telling in some parts, and I really appreciate that. I can't explain why I don't want to give this book a 10 out of 10. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. This book is fantastic, and I think you should read it. It's just not quite the masterpiece that I think Neuromancer is. There we go. That is book 4, 5, something of Cyberpunk Month. I'm really hoping to get at least one more done. There's a book that's meant to be arriving in the mail, I'm hoping today, and then I'll try and read that over the next couple of days and get a review out by the end of the week. If not, I've already started on Burning Chrome by William Gibson, and I'm really enjoying that so far, so I might talk about that. Let me know in the comments below if you've enjoyed Cyberpunk Month, if you've read any of the books that I've read, if you've been enjoying it. If you want to pick up any of the books that I've read or talked about in this video, there will be links in the description below. The channel gets a little bit of a kickback from Amazon and it doesn't cost you anything extra. If you're interested in getting these books, I would probably just go ahead and grab the box set. I think the box set is about the price of 2 of the books and it comes with 4. That's what I did, and I actually ended up with 2 copies of Neuromancer because I previously bought Neuromancer. Thank you so much for watching. If you still are, leave a comment below, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, but most of all, just remember to keep reading.